The distant wail of a police siren jolted me awake, my heart pounding in the dimly lit bedroom. I instinctively reached across the bed, only to find the other side cold and empty. Memories of last night's argument with Eric flooded back, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Rubbing my eyes, I glanced at the nightstand and froze. A plain white envelope propped against the lamp caught my attention. With trembling hands, I tore it open to find a note scribbled in my mother's handwriting. "Marla, we've decided to move on and start fresh. Don't try to find us. It's better this way." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. The air seemingly sucked out of the room. Start fresh? Without me? What about Luke? Panic gripped me as I scrambled to find my phone, dialing my parents' number frantically. No answer. I tried Eli's number, straight to voicemail. Clara's phone went unanswered too. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this sudden abandonment. Had I done something wrong? Was this because of the fight with Eric last night? Questions swirled relentlessly, but no answers presented themselves. Stumbling out of bed, I made my way to Luke's room, my heart sinking further at the sight of his empty crib. They wouldn't. Desperate, I searched every room, clinging to the hope that this was some cruel prank. But the truth became undeniable. They were gone, taking my son with them, leaving me alone in this big, empty house. Sinking to the floor, I cradled the note, hot tears streaming down my face. How could they do this to me, to Luke? Didn't I deserve better than a cold, impersonal goodbye? Memories of my childhood resurfaced, moments when I felt overlooked and insignificant compared to the golden children, Eli and Clara. Eli with his charming ways and academic achievements basking in our parents' pride. Clara, the obedient daughter who could do no wrong, and me, the forgotten middle child, too rebellious, too questioning for their liking. But this, abandoning me like this, taking my son away without a word, it felt like a cruel betrayal, a slap in the face from the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. As the sun peeked through the curtains, its warmth offering little comfort, I knew one thing for certain. I would find them, and they would answer for this injustice. If they thought a measly note could erase years of neglect and favoritism, they were sorely mistaken. This was just the beginning. In the days that followed, I found myself sinking deeper into a pit of despair. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with a deafening silence that chilled me to the bone. Every corner, every room held memories of a life that no longer existed. I tried to distract myself, throwing myself into work, but even that offered little solace. The pitying looks from colleagues only served as reminders of my newfound solitude. Evenings were the worst, the emptiness creeping in like an unwelcome guest, taunting me with visions of happier times. Desperate for answers, I pored over old family albums, searching for clues that might explain my parents' inexplicable actions. As I flipped through the pages, a disturbing pattern emerged. A stark contrast between the beaming faces of Eli and Clara and my own sullen expression, often cropped or relegated to the background. It was as if I had been an afterthought, a mere bystander in my own family's narrative. Achievements that should have been celebrated were met with indifference, while Eli's every success was lauded as a triumph of parenthood. "Look at our brilliant son," my father would proclaim, his chest puffed with pride. "He's going to make us proud." And Clara, the ever-obedient daughter, could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" she'd chide me. "So well-behaved and focused." Focused on what, exactly? Pleasing everyone but herself? I had always been the one to question, to challenge the status quo, and for that I was labeled the rebellious one, the black sheep of the family. One particularly vivid memory resurfaced, a Thanksgiving dinner from my teenage years. Eli had just been accepted into an Ivy League school, and the evening was a celebration of his achievement. As the family raised their glasses in toast, my father turned to me, his eyes cold and devoid of warmth. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" he sneered. "Maybe then we'd have something to be proud of." Those words cut deeper than any blade, leaving an invisible scar that never fully healed. In that moment, I knew I would never be enough in their eyes, no matter how hard I tried. As I slammed the album shut, anger coursed through my veins. All those years of neglect, of being made to feel inferior, had culminated in this ultimate betrayal. They had discarded me like a piece of unwanted baggage, whisking away my son without a second thought. A newfound determination took root, a burning desire to confront them, to make them answer for their cruelty. They would not get away with this, not while I still breathed. I would find them, and they would face the consequences of their actions, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed were a blur of anguish and anger. I found myself spiraling, consumed by the memories of a lifetime spent in the shadows of my so-called perfect siblings. Every slight, every dismissal played on a loop in my mind, fueling the flames of resentment. One particularly painful recollection stood out: my high school graduation. As I crossed the stage, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd eagerly, hoping to catch a glimpse of pride on my parents' faces. But their eyes were fixed on Eli, who had just been awarded a prestigious scholarship. "That's my son," my father beamed, slapping Eli on the back. "He's going to make us all proud." My mother chimed in, "Yes, our brilliant boy. We're so fortunate to have him." Their words cut like knives, leaving me hollowed and invisible, even on what should have been my day to shine. Later that evening, as we celebrated with a family dinner, the conversation revolved solely around Eli's accomplishments and future plans. I tried to interject, to share my own hopes and dreams, but my voice was quickly drowned out by my mother's gushing praises for my overachieving brother. "Marla, dear, don't you wish you could be more like your brother?" she said, her tone laced with condescension. "He's going to do such great things." The implication was clear: I would never measure up, no matter what I achieved. In their eyes, I was already a lost cause, a disappointment. As the evening wore on, I retreated to the safety of my room, my diploma clutched tightly in my hands. Tears streamed down my face as I stared at the once cherished piece of paper, now a cruel reminder of my insignificance. "Why bother even trying?" I whispered to myself. "They'll never see me, not really." In that moment, a part of me withered, replaced by a simmering resentment that would only grow stronger with each passing year. Even after I had Luke, my own child, my parents' favoritism persisted. While they doted on their grandchildren from Eli and Clara, showering them with love and attention, Luke was often an afterthought, a mere obligation. "He's such a fussy baby," my mother would remark, her nose wrinkled in disdain. "Are you sure you're doing everything right?" The implication was clear. I was a failure, even as a mother. As these memories resurfaced, I found myself consumed by a burning rage, a desire for vengeance that threatened to consume me whole. They had taken everything from me: my family, my son, my sense of self-worth, and for what? Because I didn't fit their mold of perfection? Well, no more. I would make them see me, even if it was the last thing I did. They would pay for their cruelty, for the years of emotional torture they had inflicted. And this time, they would be the ones left in the shadows, forgotten and insignificant. With a newfound determination, I began to formulate a plan, a way to make them truly understand the depth of their betrayal. Revenge would be mine, and it would be sweet. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of my estranged Uncle Jack. I hadn't seen or spoken to him in years, not since the falling out he had with my parents over some long-forgotten slight. The doorbell rang one dreary afternoon, jolting me from my self-imposed misery. I shuffled to the door, half expecting it to be another debt collector or someone peddling unwanted wares. But when I opened it, there stood Jack, a somber expression etched onto his weathered face. "Marla," he said, his voice thick with concern, "I heard what happened." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a tight embrace, and something within me broke. The floodgates opened, and I sobbed uncontrollably into his shoulder, all the pain and anguish I had bottled up spilling forth. Jack ushered me inside, his strong, calloused hands guiding me to the couch. He listened patiently as I poured out the sordid tale of my family's betrayal, his eyes flickering with a mixture of sadness and rage. "Those bastards," he muttered, shaking his head. "I always knew they were twisted, but this is a new low." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of validation, of being truly seen and understood. Jack had always been the outsider, the one who refused to buy into my parents' illusion of perfection. "You don't deserve this, kiddo," he said, his voice laced with conviction. "You're worth 1,000 of them, and it's about time someone showed you that." In that moment, Jack became my lifeline, offering me a safe haven away from the suffocating loneliness of the house. He insisted I stay with him, at least until I could get back on my feet. No arguments, he stated firmly when I tried to protest. You need someone in your corner, and I'll be damned if I let those vultures pick over what's left of you. And so, with a heavy heart and a single duffel bag of belongings, I said goodbye to the home that had once been my sanctuary, now tainted by the ghosts of happier times. Jack's modest apartment became my refuge, a place where I could start to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. Over the following weeks, he became my rock, offering unwavering support and guidance as I navigated the turbulent waters of single motherhood and abandonment. He listened without judgment as I shared my deepest fears and insecurities, the wounds inflicted by years of parental neglect. You've got a strength in you, kid, he'd say, his eyes alight with pride. A fire that those fools could never extinguish, no matter how hard they tried. Slowly, with Jack's encouragement, I began to rebuild. I enrolled in night classes, determined to finish the degree I had abandoned years earlier. And as the pieces of my life started to fall into place, a new sense of purpose took root. A burning desire to not just survive, but to thrive, to rise like a phoenix from the ashes of my past. My revenge would come, not through petty vengeance, but through success, a resounding triumph over the doubts and limitations that had been imposed upon me for far too long. And when the time was right, when I had climbed to the heights they never thought possible, I would confront them, and they would be forced to reckon with the woman I had become. Strong, resilient, and unapologetic. The following months were a whirlwind of determination and hard work. With Jack's unwavering support, I threw myself into my studies, determined to make up for lost time. The late nights spent poring over textbooks and cramming for exams became a welcome distraction from the lingering ache of my family's betrayal. You've got this, kiddo, Jack would say, sliding a fresh cup of coffee across the table as I buried myself in research papers. Show those bastards what you're really made of. His words fueled me, igniting a fire within that refused to be extinguished. I was no longer the overlooked, underestimated middle child. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I would stop at nothing to prove my worth. As the semesters flew by, my grades soared, and I found myself drawn to the world of entrepreneurship. The idea of building something from the ground up, of carving my own path, resonated deeply within me. It was a chance to shed the shackles of my past and forge a new identity, one defined by my own ambitions and achievements. I want to start my own business, I confided in Jack one evening, my eyes alight with determination. Something that's truly mine, something they can't take away from me. Jack's face broke into a wide grin, and he clapped me on the shoulder. That's my girl, he said, pride evident in his voice. You've got the fire, the drive. Now it's time to show the world what you're capable of. With his encouragement, I began to flesh out my ideas, poring over market research and drafting business plans late into the night. The concept was simple, yet innovative, a service that would revolutionize the way people approached personal finance and wealth management. As graduation loomed, I found myself standing before Jack, diploma in hand, a triumphant smile etched across my face. This time, there were no shadows to lurk in, no overbearing expectations to weigh me down. This achievement was mine and mine alone. I knew you had it in you, Jack said, pulling me into a fierce hug. Now it's time to take on the world. And take it on I did. With Jack's financial backing and unwavering belief in me, I launched my fledgling business, pouring every ounce of my being into making it a success. The long hours and countless sacrifices were a small price to pay for the chance to forge my own destiny. As the months ticked by, my hard work began to pay off. Word of my innovative approach spread like wildfire, and soon clients were beating down my door. With each success, each milestone reached, I felt a sense of vindication, a silent victory over those who had doubted and dismissed me. But beneath the surface, a burning desire for retribution simmered, fueled by the memories of a childhood spent in the shadows. I knew deep down that true fulfillment would only come when I had faced my demons head-on, when I had made my family confront the consequences of their actions. And as my empire grew, as the accolades and media attention poured in, I knew that day was fast approaching. They would soon see the woman they had so callously cast aside, the phoenix that had risen from the ashes of their cruelty. And when they did, They would have no choice but to bow before the force of my resilience and determination. Revenge was no longer a fleeting desire. It was an inevitability, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of the life they had built on lies and favoritism. And I, Marla, the once forgotten daughter, would be the architect of their undoing. The years that followed were a whirlwind of success and validation. My business took off like a rocket, quickly becoming the go-to solution for financial planning and wealth management. Clients flocked to my innovative approach, drawn to the fresh perspective and personalized service I offered. As the accolades and media attention poured in, I found myself basking in the spotlight, a far cry from the shadows I had once inhabited within my own family. Each award, each glowing review, felt like a triumph over the doubts and limitations that had been imposed upon me for so long. "This is just the beginning, kiddo," Jack would say, beaming with pride as we celebrated another milestone. "You're showing those fools what they missed out on." And indeed, with each passing year, my success seemed to grow exponentially. My name became synonymous with excellence, my methods lauded as revolutionary. I was living, breathing proof that perseverance and determination could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Yet, beneath the surface, a part of me remained unsettled, a hunger for retribution that could not be sated by professional accomplishments alone. As my empire expanded, so too did the nagging desire to confront the demons of my past, to make my family reckon with the consequences of their actions. It was during one of my many media interviews that the opportunity presented itself. The reporter, a seasoned veteran known for her hard-hitting questions, couldn't resist delving into my personal life. "Your success is truly remarkable," she said, her piercing gaze fixed upon me. "But what drives you, Miss Johnson? What fuels this insatiable ambition?" For a moment I considered deflecting, offering up the usual platitudes about hard work and dedication, but something within me snapped, and the floodgates opened. "Revenge," I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. "A burning desire to prove wrong those who doubted me, who tried to break me." The reporter's eyes widened, and she leaned forward, sensing a juicy story. "Care to elaborate?" And so I did. I laid bare the sordid tale of my childhood, the years spent in the shadows of my perfect siblings, the emotional neglect and manipulation that had left indelible scars. I spoke of the ultimate betrayal, the cold goodbye that had torn my life asunder and set me on this relentless path to success. As the words tumbled out raw and unfiltered, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The carefully constructed facade I had built, the mask of composed professionalism, crumbled away, revealing the raw, wounded soul beneath. The interview was a sensation, my candid revelations sparking a media frenzy. Overnight, I became the subject of intense scrutiny, my personal life dissected and analyzed by the masses. And then, like moths drawn to a flame, they emerged from the shadows. My estranged family, their once pristine image now tarnished by the harsh light of truth. It started with a tentative phone call from Clara, her voice trembling with a mixture of shame and desperation. "Marla," she pleaded, "we need to talk. They're not what they seem." I could sense the vulnerability in her words, the cracks beginning to show in the facade of perfection they had so carefully cultivated. "Talk," I scoffed. "About what, dear sister? About how you stood by and watched as our parents played favorites? As they systematically crushed my spirit and self-worth?" The line went silent, and I knew I had struck a nerve. But Clara was merely the opening salvo. Soon the calls and messages came pouring in, each one more desperate than the last. My parents, their once lofty pedestals crumbling beneath the weight of their own lies and manipulation, begged for a chance to explain, to make amends. And in that moment I realized the true depths of my revenge. It wasn't simply about success or triumph. It was about stripping away the illusion they had clung to for so long, laying bare the ugly truth for all to see. With a newfound sense of power, I agreed to meet them, to hear their explanations and excuses. But deep down, I knew that no apology, no justification could ever undo the damage they had wrought. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, and now they would reap the bitter harvest of their actions. And I, the once forgotten daughter, would be the one to deliver the final blow, the reckoning they had so long avoided. The day of the long-awaited reunion dawned, and I found myself a bundle of mixed emotions: anger, anticipation, and a strange sense of power. After years of being the overlooked, underestimated daughter, the tables had turned, and now they were the ones seeking my approval, my mercy. I had chosen the location carefully. A sleek, upscale restaurant in the heart of the city, a far cry from the cozy, familiar diners of our childhood. This was my domain, my territory, and they would be forced to play by my rules. As I strode through the doors, heads turned, whispers rippling through the hushed murmurs of the patrons. My name, once a mere afterthought, now carried weight, commanding respect and attention. And there they were, huddled at a corner table like errant children summoned before the principal. My parents, their once proud demeanors diminished, their eyes downcast and ashamed. Eli, the golden child, his once charming veneer cracked and worn. And Clara, her mask of perfection slipping, revealing the insecurities that had long festered beneath. "Marla," my mother croaked, her voice trembling, "we're so glad you agreed to meet with us." I said nothing, simply sliding into the empty chair and fixing them with an icy stare. Let them squirm, let them feel the weight of their transgressions bearing down upon them. "We owe you an apology," my father chimed in, his words hollow and rehearsed. "We've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and you suffered because of them." Eli nodded vigorously, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "We never meant to make you feel lesser, sis. You have to believe that." I wanted to scream, to hurl the catalog of grievances I had compiled over the years directly in their faces. But I remained silent, allowing the tension to build, the discomfort to fester. It was Clara who finally broke, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as tears streamed down her face. "Please, Marla," she sobbed. "We need your help. We've lost everything, the business, the money, everything. You're our only hope." Ah, there it was, the true reason for this little charade, the desperation that had driven them to seek me out after all these years. Not genuine remorse or a desire to make amends, but the cold, harsh reality of their own failings. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, and I shook my head slowly, savoring the moment. "Help?" I echoed, my voice dripping with contempt. "After everything you've put me through, you have the audacity to ask for my help?" Their faces fell, the weight of their mistakes finally settling upon them like a oppressive shroud. "But you're our daughter," my mother stammered, grasping at straws. "Our flesh and blood. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive us." Forgive them after years of emotional neglect, of being made to feel like an afterthought in my own family? The very notion was laughable. "Forgiveness?" I spat, leaning forward, my eyes blazing with barely contained fury. "You want forgiveness? Then you'll have to earn it, on my terms." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded with implications. They knew, deep down, that this wasn't a simple request for aid. It was a reckoning, a chance for them to atone for the sins of the past. "Anything," Eli pleaded, his once proud demeanor reduced to shameful groveling. "Just name your price." A cruel smile twisted my lips as I surveyed their pathetic, broken forms. The power, the control, was intoxicating, a heady brew of vindication and retribution. "Family counseling," I stated, my voice firm and unyielding. "All of us together, laying bare the ugly truths we've been carrying for far too long. And not just a few sessions, but a true, deep dive into the dysfunctional cesspool that spawned our so-called family." Their faces registered a mixture of shock and horror, but I pressed on, relentless. "And that's just the beginning. If you want my help, if you want a chance at redemption, you'll have to confront the demons you've been running from for years. Every slight, every betrayal, every ounce of pain you've inflicted upon me, it all comes to light. No more secrets, no more lies." The weight of my demands settled upon them, crushing and inescapable. This was their penance, their opportunity to bare their souls and face the consequences of their actions. "Well," I challenged, arching an eyebrow, "what's it going to be? Freedom from the past, or a lifetime of regrets?" In that moment, they knew. The tables had turned, and I held all the cards. Their once perfect family, the veneer of success and unity, had crumbled to dust. And I, the forgotten daughter, had risen from the ashes, a phoenix reborn, ready to burn away the lies and deceit that had poisoned us for far too long. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of confrontation and raw emotion. True to my demands, we began family counseling sessions, intense, no-holds-barred explorations into the twisted dynamics that had fractured us for so long. Let's start at the beginning, the therapist said. Her calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the palpable tension in the room. Marla, share with us your earliest memories of feeling overlooked or neglected. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the onslaught of painful recollections that threatened to spill forth. Beside me, my parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces etched with apprehension. I was 7 years old, I began, my voice thick with barely contained emotion. It was my birthday, and all I wanted was for my parents to be there, to make me feel special, just for one day. The memories came flooding back, raw and vivid. But instead, they were fawning over Ely, praising him for some academic achievement or another. I remember sitting alone in the living room, clutching my teddy bear, listening to the sounds of celebration from the other room. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but the therapist silenced her with a raised hand. "Let her speak," she said, her tone firm yet compassionate. And speak I did, unleashing a torrent of pent-up grievances and resentments that had festered for decades. Each memory, each slight, laid bare for all to witness. The time Clara received a lavish quinceañera while my 16th birthday went unacknowledged. The countless school plays and recitals where my parents' seats remained empty, their attention focused elsewhere. As the words tumbled out, I could see the impact they had, like daggers piercing the delusions my family had clung to for so long. Eli's confident facade cracked, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Clara, once the perfect daughter, dissolved into quiet sobs, her mask of composure shattered. And my parents? Their reactions were perhaps the most visceral of all. Gone was the smug indifference, the dismissive attitudes that had once been their armor. In its place, a raw, naked vulnerability, a dawning realization of the damage they had wrought. We never meant to make you feel that way," my father stammered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We were just so focused on their successes, we lost sight of everything else." My mother nodded, her eyes downcast with shame. "We failed you, Marla. We failed as parents, and there's no excuse for that." In that moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication, a twisted form of justice. For years, they had brushed aside my feelings, my very existence, in pursuit of their idea of perfection. But now, confronted with the harsh reality of their actions, they had no choice but to face the consequences. The sessions continued, each one peeling back another layer of the toxic familial onion. Resentments were aired, old wounds reopened, and through it all, a strange sense of catharsis began to take hold. But even as the healing process began, a part of me remained guarded, wary of their intentions. Were they truly committed to change, or was this simply a last-ditch effort to regain my favor, to secure the financial assistance they so desperately craved? The answer came during one particularly heated session, when the therapist broached the subject of their ultimate betrayal, the cold, impersonal goodbye that had shattered my world. "Why did you do it?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Why did you take my son away from me, without a word, without any explanation?" For a moment they were silent, their eyes downcast, ashamed. Then, in a move that surprised us all, Eli spoke up, his voice thick with remorse. "It was my idea," he confessed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I was the one who convinced Mom and Dad to cut ties, to start over without the baggage of the past." The revelation hung in the air like a lead weight, suffocating and damning. "You," I whispered, my hands curling into fists, "you took my child from me, my own flesh and blood, because he was baggage?" Eli flinched, his body recoiling from the venom in my words. "I was selfish," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I wanted a clean slate, a chance to rebuild our family's legacy without the distractions of the past." In that moment, the floodgates burst open, and a torrent of rage and anguish poured forth. I hurled every insult, every curse at their trembling forms, my vision blurred by tears of fury. The session descended into chaos, the therapist's attempts to regain control drowned out by the force of my emotional maelstrom. And as the dust settled, a sobering realization took hold. There was no redemption to be found here, no path to forgiveness or reconciliation. They had crossed a line, a boundary that could never be uncrossed. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. With a heavy heart, I turned to face the shattered remnants of my family, my eyes steeled with resolution. This is over," I declared, my voice steady and unwavering. "I gave you a chance, an opportunity to make amends, and you squandered it. Their protests fell on deaf ears as I rose to my feet, gathering my belongings. I don't need your money or your help, I continued, each word slicing through the tension like a razor-sharp blade. I've built something for myself, something real and lasting without your interference. And as I turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness, a lingering ache for the family I had once longed for but could never have. Goodbye, I whispered, more to myself than to them. And this time it's for good. With those parting words, I stepped out into the world, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The shackles of the past had been severed, the cycle of toxicity broken. My revenge, in the end, was not a grand act of retribution, but a simple act of defiance. A refusal to be defined by the pain and neglect of my upbringing. I had risen from the ashes, a phoenix reborn, and I would forge my own path, one unmarred by the sins of my family. And as I looked towards the future, a newfound sense of clarity washed over me. The past could no longer hold me hostage. I was free to embrace the life I had fought so hard to build, surrounded by those who truly loved and supported me. Jack's beaming smile and the innocent laughter of my son filled my heart with a warmth I had never known, a love untainted by the baggage of dysfunction and betrayal. This was my legacy, my true family, a bond forged not by blood, but by the shared triumphs and hardships that had shaped us. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. For I was Marla, the phoenix risen from the ashes, and my story was just beginning. I stared at Delia's newborn cradled in her arms, an overwhelming sense of disbelief washing over me. My eyes darted between the tiny bundle and the man standing beside her. Greg, my husband of 7 years. "What's going on?" I choked out, unable to process the sight before me. Delia, my supposed best friend since college, looked up at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Leela, I should have told you sooner," she began, her voice laced with guilt. "Greg and I, we're together. This is our child." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, stealing my breath away. My mind raced back to our carefree days at university, when Delia and I were inseparable. We'd shared every secret, every triumph and heartbreak. How could she betray me like this? Greg shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. "Lila, I'm sorry. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, fury rapidly replacing the initial shock. "You've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back, and that's all you have to say?" Delia flinched, clutching the baby closer. "We never meant to hurt you, Lila. Things just got complicated." Complicated didn't begin to cover it. My marriage, my friendships, my entire world, all crumbling before my eyes. I thought back to the past year, Greg's frequent business trips and late nights at the office. The signs were there, but I'd been too blind to see them. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Greg sighed heavily. "About a year. A year. 12 months of lies and deception right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. Delia reached out to me, her eyes pleading. "Lila, please try to understand." "Understand?" I cut her off, recoiling from her touch. "How can I possibly understand this? You've betrayed me in the worst way imaginable." Greg stepped forward, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "It's not that simple, Lila. Delia and I, we love each other." His words felt like a slap in the face. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word." I spun on my heel, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. "Don't worry, you won't have to explain yourselves. I'm done." As I stormed out of the hospital room, the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. But beneath the pain and anger, a newfound resolve took root. They would pay for this. I would make sure of it. The drive home passed in a blur, a torrent of emotions raging within me. Delia's betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined, her selfish actions shattering the bond we once shared. But it was Greg's deceit that cut me to the core. The man I'd vowed to spend my life with had obliterated that promise without a second thought. As I pulled into the driveway, I steeled myself, forcing a mask of calm over my features. Greg couldn't know the depths of my knowledge, not yet. I needed to play along, to gather the evidence that would bring their twisted game crashing down. The front door swung open, and there he stood, a bemused expression on his face. "Everything okay? You look shaken up." I mustered a tight smile, willing my voice steady. "Yeah, just A long day at the hospital visiting Delia. The lies slipped off my tongue with surprising ease. You know how exhausting she can be. Greg chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the maelstrom raging within me. That's our Delia, always one for drama. He pulled me into an embrace, and I fought the urge to recoil from his touch. Over the next few days, I watched him like a hawk, scrutinizing his every move for signs of his deception. The little things I'd once overlooked now glared at me. The lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume, the furtive glances at his phone, the late nights working. How could I have been so blind? Determined to unravel the truth, I made a call to an old friend, a private investigator I'd known since college. Within hours, he had Greg's movements under surveillance, tracking his comings and goings with meticulous detail. The evidence trickled in slowly at first, receipts for expensive dinners, hotel charges on our joint credit card. But then the floodgates opened and a clearer picture emerged. Delia had been siphoning money from our accounts for months, funneling it into a hidden slush fund. Plane tickets, jewelry, even a down payment on a cozy little bungalow, all purchased with our hard-earned savings, all part of their twisted plan. With each new revelation, my fury burned hotter, an inferno of rage threatening to consume me. But I kept my cool, maintaining the facade of marital bliss while secretly plotting my revenge. Then, one fateful day, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. A copy of a prenatal agreement between Greg and Delia, outlining their intentions to raise the child together, at my expense. I clutched the damning document, my hands trembling. They'd played me for a fool, using my love and trust as weapons against me. But no more. It was time to strike back, to expose their web of lies and make them face the consequences of their actions. As I looked up, my gaze fell on Greg, laughing and chatting with friends like nothing was amiss. A cruel smile tugged at my lips. Oh, how the tables were about to turn. With the prenatal agreement in hand, I finally had the smoking gun I needed. Greg and Delia's deception was laid bare, their treacherous plot exposed in black and white. But the document was just the tip of the iceberg. My investigation had unearthed a trail of lies that ran deeper than I could have imagined. Greg's suspicious behavior only escalated in the following days, his absences growing longer and more frequent. I'd catch him poring over financial statements late into the night, his brow furrowed with worry. Little did he know, I was one step ahead, meticulously cataloging every cent he and Delia had siphoned from our accounts. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into offshore accounts and untraceable investments. It was clear they'd been planning this for years, methodically bleeding me dry while I remained obliviously in love. Through it all, I maintained my facade of normalcy, playing the doting wife while quietly gathering the arsenal that would bring them to their knees. But even as the evidence mounted, a part of me still struggled to comprehend the depths of their betrayal. How could Delia, my oldest friend, the woman who'd once sworn to be my maid of honor, do this to me? We'd shared everything, from our deepest secrets to our wildest dreams. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. And Greg? The man I'd vowed to love and cherish, the father I'd hoped to raise children with. His lies cut deepest of all, a vile violation of the sacred trust between husband and wife. I'd given him everything, and he'd repaid me with deceit and betrayal. As the days ticked by, my resentment festered, fueled by each new revelation. I pored over the evidence, committing every sordid detail to memory. The fake business trips, the clandestine rendezvous, the countless nights they'd lain together while I remained blissfully unaware. Through it all, I remained an island of calm on the surface, even as a storm of rage raged within me. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt and paranoia driving a wedge between us. But I played along, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike. That moment came in the form of a family gathering, a celebration of my sister-in-law's promotion at work. It was the ideal stage, a chance to expose their duplicity before the very people they'd hoped to deceive. As the invitations went out, I couldn't help but smile at the delicious irony. They thought they were attending a joyous occasion, blissfully unaware that it would be the scene of their downfall. Little did they know, the game was up, and I held all the cards. With each passing day my anticipation grew, a heady mix of dread and exhilaration coursing through my veins. Soon they would face the consequences of their actions, their lies laid bare before the world. And I would be the one to deliver the final, crushing blow. As the days ticked down to the fateful family gathering, I found an unexpected ally in my quest for retribution. Greg's own sister, Jenna. It turned out she'd harbored suspicions about her brother's fidelity for years, her intuition picking up on the subtle signs I'd been too naive to see. "I always knew there was something off about him," she confided in me over coffee one afternoon. "The late nights, the shady business deals, it all reeked of a man with something to hide." I nodded grimly, sliding the damning prenatal agreement across the table. Jenna's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her expression morphing from shock to fury. "That bastard," she hissed, slamming her fist on the table. "How could he do this to you, Lila? To our family?" In that moment, I saw a kindred spirit in Jenna, a woman wronged by the same man, her trust betrayed by blood. Without hesitation, I laid out the full scope of Greg and Delia's deception, every sordid detail I'd uncovered through my investigation. Jenna listened in stunned silence, her anger growing with each revelation. By the time I finished, she was trembling with rage, her knuckles white from gripping the table's edge. "We have to make them pay," she growled, her eyes blazing with determination. "They can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Over the next few days, Jenna and I became co-conspirators, meticulously plotting our revenge. We pored over the evidence, strategizing the perfect moment and method to expose Greg and Delia's duplicity. "The family gathering is our best shot," Jenna mused, tapping her pen against the stack of incriminating documents. "We can't let them wriggle out of this one." "Agreed," I replied, my voice steely with resolve. "They need to face the consequences of their actions in front of everyone they've betrayed." As the event drew nearer, our plan solidified. We would let Greg and Delia bask in the illusion of normalcy, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then, at the height of the celebration, we would drop our bombshell, unleashing the full weight of their deception before the entire family. "They'll have nowhere to run," Jenna murmured, a predatory glint in her eye. "No more lies, no more secrets, just the ugly truth laid bare for all to see." With each passing day, my anticipation grew, fueled by the knowledge that retribution was finally within reach. Greg and Delia had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and their arrogance would be their undoing. As the hours ticked down, I found myself dwelling on Delia's betrayal, the sting of her deceit cutting deeper than I could have imagined. We'd been more than friends. We'd been sisters, bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of youth. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. Her actions spoke of a darkness within, a bottomless well of greed and manipulation that knew no bounds. With each new revelation about her past misdeeds, my disgust grew. The friendships she'd sabotaged, the lives she'd callously upended in pursuit of her own desires. She was a viper in human skin, striking without remorse or regret. But soon her venomous ways would be laid bare, her toxic influence forever purged from my life. Jenna and I would see to that, our righteous fury burning hotter with every treacherous detail we uncovered. As the appointed day dawned, a sense of grim determination settled over me. It was time to stop playing the victim and take control of my own destiny. Greg and Delia had made their bed, and now they would lie in it, their web of lies unraveled before the very people they'd sought to deceive. No more games, no more deception. Only the cold, hard truth and the consequences they so richly deserved. The days leading up to the family gathering were a flurry of activity as Jenna and I meticulously prepared for our grand reveal. Every detail had to be perfect, from the staging of the evidence to the timing of our dramatic entrance. "We can't leave anything to chance," Jenna muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration as she arranged the damning documents in a precise order. "One misstep, and they'll try to wriggle their way out of this mess." I nodded grimly, my jaw set with determination. "They won't get that chance. We'll have them dead to rights, with nowhere to run." As the appointed day drew nearer, a strange dichotomy took hold within me. On the surface, I maintained a facade of normalcy, going about my daily routine as if nothing were amiss. But beneath that veneer, a storm of emotions raged. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for justice. Greg remained oblivious to the gathering storm, his guilt and paranoia driving him deeper into a spiral of deception. I watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust, marveling at the depths to which he had sunk. "How could you do this to me, Greg?" I asked one night, my voice laced with venom. "To our family?" He froze, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. For a moment, I thought he might finally come clean, to confess his sins and beg for forgiveness. But then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out, his words dripping with vitriol. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he spat, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're so innocent, but you're just as guilty as the rest of us." His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely resolve, my voice low and dangerous. "Keep telling yourself that, Greg. But know this, the truth always comes out in the end, no matter how hard you try to bury it." As the days ticked down, the tension in our household became palpable, a thick fog of mistrust and resentment that hung heavy in the air. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt driving a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, Jenna and I remained steadfast, our resolve hardening with each passing hour. We were warriors on a mission, armed with the weapons of truth and justice, and nothing would deter us from our path. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived, and we put the final touches on our plan. The stage was set, the evidence meticulously arranged, and the guest list carefully curated to ensure maximum impact. As the guests began to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement mingled with trepidation. This was it. The moment we'd been building towards, the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation. Greg and Delia arrived fashionably late, as always, their smug expressions a clear indication that they had no idea what was in store for them. As they mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and basking in the illusion of normalcy, I caught Jenna's eye from across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, her expression grim and determined. It was time. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. All eyes turned towards me, a hush falling over the room as I cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "But I'm afraid this isn't the celebration you were led to believe." Greg's brow furrowed in confusion, but before he could speak, I pressed on. "No, this is something far more important, a reckoning, if you will. This is a chance to shed light on the lies and deception that have been festering in our midst for far too long." Jenna stepped forward, her expression steely as she brandished the stack of documents. "Greg and Delia, you have been caught red-handed," she announced, her voice ringing out in the stunned silence. "Your betrayal, your greed, your utter disregard for the people who loved you. It all ends here today." As the truth began to unfold, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened in shock and disbelief. But I pressed on, unflinching, laying bare every sordid detail of their duplicity. The stolen money, the secret rendezvous, the twisted prenatal agreement. Nothing was left uncovered, no stone unturned in our pursuit of justice. With each new revelation, Greg and Delia's faces drained of color, their smug expressions replaced by ones of abject horror. And when it was over, when the last damning piece of evidence had been presented, a deafening silence hung in the air. All eyes turned towards the disgraced couple, their guilt laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me, a righteous fury that burned brighter than any flame. They had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences, the scorn and condemnation of the very people they had sought to deceive. As Greg opened his mouth to speak, to offer some feeble excuse or desperate plea for forgiveness, I held up my hand, silencing him with a single defiant gesture. "Save your breath," I said, my voice laced with icy contempt. "The time for lies is over. You've dug your graves, and now you'll lie in them." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them to face the music they had so richly earned. The game was over, the battle won, and justice, at long last, had been served. The moment the truth spilled forth, a hush descended over the room, the weight of Greg and Delia's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Stunned faces turned towards the disgraced couple, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Greg was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Layla, you can't be serious. This is all just a big misunderstanding." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice dripping with contempt. "Save it, Greg. The evidence speaks for itself. Your lies, your deceit, your utter disregard for me and our family. It's all right here, laid bare for everyone to see." Delia stepped forward, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're making a huge mistake, Lila," she hissed, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Greg and I love each other. We were going to come clean, to start a new life together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "Is that what you tell yourself at night, Delia? That this was all some grand love affair, some romantic notion of destiny?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me clear the air for you. This was nothing more than a calculated scheme, a vile plot to bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. And the worst part? You used our friendship, our bond, as a weapon against me." Jenna stepped forward, her expression one of barely contained fury as she brandished a sheaf of documents. "Don't even try to deny it, you two. We have it all right here. The money trails, the secret accounts, the twisted prenatal agreement." As she began to recite the sordid details of their deception, Greg and Delia's faces paled, the realization of their exposure setting in. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd, hands flying to cover gasps of shock and horror. "You see?" I said, my voice ringing out over the din. "This was never about love or destiny or any of that fairy tale garbage. It was about greed, pure and simple, a despicable act of betrayal perpetrated by two people who claimed to care about me." Greg opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't bother with excuses or apologies, Greg. They'll fall on deaf ears. You made your bed, and now you get to lie in it." Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep, steadying breath. I know this is a lot to take in, believe me, but the truth had to come out, no matter how ugly or painful it might be. Greg and Delia have been living a lie, spinning a web of deception that ensnared us all. "But no more," Jenna chimed in, her voice resolute. "Their games end here, their lies exposed for all to see. It's time for them to face the consequences of their actions." As the weight of our words sank in, a palpable shift occurred in the room. The initial shock and disbelief gave way to outrage, fingers pointed and voices raised in condemnation. Greg and Delia shrank back, their facade of confidence crumbling in the face of such overwhelming censure. But just when I thought their humiliation was complete, one final twist emerged, a revelation that not even I could have anticipated. "You know, Lila," Delia said, her voice laced with a newfound bravado, "you're only seeing part of the picture here." My brow furrowed as I regarded her warily. "What are you talking about?" A cruel smile twisted her lips as she beckoned Greg closer. "Go on, darling. Tell them the real reason you got involved with me in the first place." Greg hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, before finally letting out a defeated sigh. "The truth is, Delia never really loved me. This was all just a long con, a way for her to get her hands on our money." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the full weight of his words sank in. Delia, emboldened by Greg's confession, tossed her head back and laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "That's right," she crowed, her eyes glittering with malice. "Greg was just a means to an end, a useful idiot to be bled dry until there was nothing left. And once I had what I wanted, I was going to leave his sorry ass in the dust." The room erupted in a cacophony of outrage, voices raised in a clamor of fury and condemnation. But through it all, Delia remained unrepentant, her expression one of smug satisfaction. As for Greg, he simply hung his head in shame, the full weight of his betrayal and stupidity crashing down upon him. In that moment, I felt a fleeting pang of pity for the man I had once loved, a weak, pathetic creature who had allowed himself to be so thoroughly manipulated and deceived. But that pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of grim vindication. Delia's true nature had been laid bare for all to see, her veneer of charm and innocence stripped away to reveal the cold, calculating monster beneath. As the chaos swirled around us, I caught Jenna's eye, a silent understanding passing between us. Our mission had been accomplished, and then some. Not only had we exposed Greg and Delia's lies, but we had uncovered an even deeper layer of depravity. With a small nod, we turned and walked away, leaving the disgraced pair to face the music they had so richly earned. The battle was won, the truth laid bare, and in the end, justice had prevailed. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, a deafening silence descended over the room, broken only by the occasional murmur of disbelief or outraged whisper. All eyes were fixed on Greg and Delia, the once smug couple reduced to cowering, disgraced shells of their former selves. I stepped forward, my voice ringing out loud and clear. Well, there you have it, folks, the truth in all its ugly glory. Greg and Delia, the lying, cheating, manipulative scum who thought they could play us all for fools. Delia opened her mouth, no doubt to spew forth another torrent of excuses or justifications, but I silenced her with a sharp gesture. Save your breath, Delia. Your words are as hollow and meaningless as your supposed love for Greg. You've been exposed for the vile, greedy snake that you truly are. Greg flinched as if struck, his face a mask of shame and regret. Lila, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just lost. Weak. Delia took advantage of me, preyed on my vulnerabilities. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disgust. Don't even try to play the victim card, Greg. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. Friends, family, I know this is a lot to take in. Believe me, I understand the shock, the outrage, the sense of betrayal you're all feeling right now. But this is the reality we face. 2 people we trusted, 2 people we loved, have revealed themselves to be nothing more than manipulative, selfish liars. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by nods and muttered curses directed at the disgraced pair. And now, it falls to us to decide what comes next. Do we forgive them, turn a blind eye to their transgressions, and allow them to slink back into our lives, our trust forever shattered? Or do we stand tall, united in our resolve to see justice done? I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in before continuing. As for me, the choice is clear. Greg, you are no longer my husband, not in any way that matters. Our marriage, our vows, our entire life together, it was all built on a foundation of lies and deception, and I will not abide by that any longer. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a withering glare. No, Greg, you don't get to speak, not anymore. Your words have lost all meaning, all power over me. From this day forward, I am severing all ties with you, legal, financial, emotional. You are dead to me, a ghost from a past I'm ready to leave behind. Turning to Delia, I felt a fresh wave of fury wash over me, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. And you vile manipulative serpent, you wormed your way into my life, exploited my trust and friendship for your own twisted gain. You are the embodiment of everything I despise: greed, selfishness, utter disregard for the harm you cause others. Delia recoiled as if struck, her eyes wide with fear and indignation, but I pressed on, undeterred. Mark my words, Delia, I will see you pay for what you've done. Every cent you've stolen, every life you've ruined in your quest for wealth and power, it will all come crashing down around you. The legal system may be blind, but I will make sure it sees the truth, the full extent of your depravity. A hush fell over the room as the gravity of my words sank in. Greg and Delia stood frozen, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of their sins finally bearing down upon them. So you see, there is no forgiveness here, no second chances. You've made your beds, and now you get to lie in them, surrounded by the wreckage of your lies and betrayals. With a final, contemptuous glance at the disgraced pair, I turned and walked away, my head held high. The battle was over, the war won, and in the end, justice would be served, no matter the cost. The fallout from the grand revelation was swift and uncompromising. Within days, the divorce papers had been filed, my lawyers moving with ruthless efficiency to extricate me from the cesspool of lies that had been my marriage to Greg. He won't know what hit him, my attorney assured me, a predatory glint in her eye as she outlined the legal onslaught we had planned. We're going to bleed him dry, just like he and that snake Delia tried to do to you. I nodded, my jaw set with grim determination. Good. I want him ruined, financially, socially, in every way imaginable. He doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. True to her word, my legal team went for the jugular, meticulously documenting every cent Greg and Delia had siphoned from our accounts, every asset they'd acquired through their web of deceit. The paper trail was damning, a laundry list of fraud and financial malfeasance that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As the case gained momentum, more and more of Delia's past misdeeds came to light, a veritable trail of broken friendships, ruined lives, and shattered trust in her wake. It seemed she'd been running her long con for years, preying on the naive and vulnerable, with a ruthless, single-minded focus. With each new revelation, my disgust for the woman I'd once called my best friend deepened. How could I have been so blind, so utterly taken in by her lies and manipulations? The signs had all been there, but I'd chosen to ignore them, blinded by my own desperate desire to believe in the sanctity of our friendship. But no more. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw Delia for the vile, heartless creature she truly was. And as the lawsuits and criminal charges piled up against her, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, knowing that her reign of terror was finally coming to an end. Greg, for his part, tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of the legal noose tightening around his neck. He begged, he pleaded, he even tried to shift the blame onto Delia, painting himself as the helpless victim of her machinations. "You have to believe me, Leela," he implored during one particularly heated courtroom confrontation. "I was just a pawn in her game, a means to an end. I never meant to hurt you like this." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice laced with icy contempt. "Save your breath, Greg. Your lies and excuses mean nothing to me now. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." As the legal battles raged on, my life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The cloud of deception and betrayal that had hung over me for so long was finally starting to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I threw myself into my work, pouring all my pain and anger into my writing. The words flowed like never before, each sentence a cathartic release, a purging of the toxicity that had plagued me for far too long. And as the dust settled and the legal battles reached their inevitable conclusion, I found myself standing triumphant amidst the wreckage of Greg and Delia's lies. They had been well and truly vanquished, their ill-gotten gains stripped away, their reputations in tatters. Greg was a shell of his former self, his once charming veneer stripped away to reveal the weak, cowardly man beneath. Delia, too, had been brought low, her arrogance and swagger replaced by the haunted look of a woman who had finally been made to face the consequences of her actions. As for me, I stood tall and unbroken, my resolve tempered by the fires of adversity. The pain and betrayal I had endured would forever leave their scars, but they had also made me stronger, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. With the legal battles behind me and my financial future secure, I turned my attention to the next chapter of my life. The world was my oyster, a blank canvas upon which I could paint the vibrant hues of my own destiny. I quit my job, said goodbye to the stifling confines of the office, and embarked on a new path, one of self-discovery, growth, and the pursuit of my true passions. I traveled, I explored, I immersed myself in the rich tapestry of life that had been denied to me for far too long. And through it all, I found myself surrounded by a newfound sense of freedom and joy, unburdened by the weight of lies and betrayal that had once threatened to crush me. My friends and family rallied around me, their love and support, a constant reminder that true strength lies not in weathering the storm alone, but in embracing the unbreakable bonds of those who truly care. As I stood on the precipice of this new beginning, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, arduous journey that had brought me to this point. The pain, the heartbreak, the searing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a test of my mettle and my resolve. And in the end, I had emerged victorious, tempered by the fires of adversity, but never consumed by them. Greg and Delia's lies had once threatened to break me, but instead they had forged me into something stronger, something unbreakable. With a contented smile, I turned my face towards the rising sun, basking in the warmth of a new day, a new life. The shadows of the past had been banished, and the future stretched out before me, ripe with boundless possibility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly free to chase my dreams, to embrace my passions, and to forge my own destiny on my own terms. The game was over, the battle won, and the spoils belonged to me alone.